You may be a soon-to-be college graduate, or someone that's learning to code through a boot camp, or maybe you're self-taught, and you want to figure out what your future holds in store for you. You want to get that big break, your first job in tech. Well, I want to give you the full scoop on exactly what you have to do to get your first job in tech. Quick background on me, I'm Israel. I am a professional software developer for 5 years now. I went to a university and got my degree in computer science. While I was not able to snag an internship while I was in school, I was able to get a job as a developer before I graduated, so I was already working a month right after graduation. In this, I learned about the experience, and something I will always want to do with my platform is help others have an easier time breaking into the tech industry. So let's get into the tips now. First up, the most important thing to get a job is that you need to have the skills for whatever position you want. Even if you don't know what you kind of want to do yet, just knowing the most popular programming languages is a great way to start for every programmer. You can't just know Java or C++ or whatever they teach you in like very entry-level courses or very super basic tutorials, whether you are a college student, a self-taught developer, or you're going through some boot camp. It doesn't matter. You have to be learning outside of the class, outside of your camp. Find in-person seminars or online courses where you can learn valuable skills actually being used in the workplace. Early on in my research, when I was trying to improve myself as a developer, I remember I watched a YouTube video that kind of mentioned that every developer should know at least 5 languages, and out of those 5, you should be extremely proficient in 2 of them. And I think at that point, that should be kind of the baseline for any developer. I think ideally you would want to be good at a front-end language and then a back-end language. Obviously, that can change on wherever you kind of want to take your career. But I think that's a very good baseline. But if you do have a desired position you want, we'll go on any job listing site and look through the requirements for that job or that position, and that'll give you a starting point for kind of the technologies or languages that you do want to know. But if you don't obviously know kind of where you want to take your career, then just learning the most popular languages is a good start as well. And I did make a video recently about the best language for new coders, and the card will be kind of up here somewhere. So go check that video out if you haven't. But okay, we have the languages and the basic skills the jobs are asking for, but what's next? So before we actually get into actually applying and interacting with the companies or hiring manager, I want you guys to first interact and hit that like button and subscribe if you're enjoying the content, finding these tips useful. I would appreciate it. It's really going to help the channel continue to grow. But what I wanted to say is that you guys need to have some sort of projects, whether it's a website, a web app, a database, an API you've created, whether it was for a class or on your own, for a boot camp. You cannot only have experience in a language and it be from only tutorials. The language and tech really start to stick with you once you've actually worked on real world style projects and you've had to problem solve through the various issues that can happen when you're coding something kind of from your mind or from scratch that isn't an idea that you're just kind of following along and copying code. This also helps you start building a portfolio, which you can then have on your personal GitHub, which then you can share to companies as you may be applying or as you progress, that can then show them proof of your code before you even step into an interview. This can be more real experience or more serious projects that you can actually include on your resume, but we will talk about that in a little bit. The next thing is going to be actually interacting with these companies. If you're going to a career fair at your university, dress your best, put on your best smile, and be as confident as can be. If you look beforehand on the website of your school or wherever this event is being promoted, you should be able to see what companies are attending beforehand. Research a handful of them that you actually are interested in. And so when you go talk to them, you can bring up a certain software that they've created, a client that they've worked with. This shows to them that you care, you're interested in the company, not just wanting, the job, even though, between you and me, we want the job and we want the money. As well as having good eye contact and confidence in your ability to quickly tell them about yourself. And your goal should always be to communicate your abilities as well as your traits that make you a quality hire, because you are someone that is always willing to learn. Some quick tips when talking to these hiring managers in person, whether you guys are being talked to in a small group, which they sometimes do in these events because they have a lot of people, or individually, is to always make sure to say something. Don't ever just walk up and hand them your resume. They are going to forget you instantly because it comes off like you just don't care and you're just dumping off your resume to as many people as you can. Always say something, always communicate, make your presence felt, but most importantly, always be respectful. Be attentive, never cut the person off, and be an active listener so that when they ask you a question, you're paying attention. And pro tip, print your resume on thicker cardstock paper or a paper that's a different color. You can usually go to Office Max or whatever store that just sells a bunch of different type of paper, get one and print your resume on it. Trust me, it makes a big difference. I literally had someone when I showed them my resume and was like, "Ooh, that's nice paper," and they specifically like could tell that it was thicker. I actually have one here that I actually used at one of my first career fairs. My career fair. And so it's actually this one. So if I get closer, you can see it's kind of yellowish. For comparison, here's a white piece of paper. So you can tell there's a little difference. This is a little thicker. It has more weight to it. So I literally handed this to one of the recruiters that was there for a company, and they were like, "Oh, this was nice." And we ended up having a conversation about the paper, and it was just like a little icebreaker that just made the conversation just go better and allowed us to be comfortable. And I could ease in, he could ease in, because, you know, at the end of the day, they're people. They also get nervous to talk to so many people. You're nervous. So little things like that is a way to just kind of joke around, get going. But definitely printing on good paper is a underrated thing that not everyone does. And they just print on flimsy paper, but you're going to have the fancy paper. And then this next tip is going to be for anyone just in general looking for a job. And that's going to be tailoring your resume to the job you're applying for. Now, more specific to the resume, you do not want to always send out the same one to everyone. If the job wants certain technologies, highlight them on your resume, make them bold, remove basic things that say nothing about how competent you're going to be at the position you're applying for. No one needs to know that you know Microsoft Word. It's expected nowadays. Remove anything you don't think helps you in the role you're applying for, and make sure to move it up, make it slightly bigger, make it bold, put it in a place on the page on your resume where someone is going to see it. Since sometimes the hiring manager or HR only has maybe a few seconds to scan a resume, if they can't quickly zoom in on what they're looking for, your opportunity is gone. Practice going over your own resume. Make sure that when you kind of scan it, your eyes go to where you want them to go. And when it comes to what projects or experience you should show off, if you don't have any professional experience from an internship or whatever, put any big projects you did in classes or on your own. And always do your best to highlight your role within these projects if maybe it was like a team project. And always make sure to place these after the skills you know, never before them, since no one's going to take the time to read them if they don't know what skills you have and they just throw you out because they don't think you're a match anyway. So you learned the skills and you applied and hopefully got the interview. Well, in my experience with tech companies, there are two forms of interviews: the behavioral interview and the technical one. First, with the behavioral interview, they really just kind of want to get to know you. Some companies care more about culture fit than others. They're going to ask you to tell them about some experiences you had, whether just in your personal life or maybe in classes, or it just kind of depends, I guess, where you're on, boot camps, etc. But here they're going to ask you to just kind of, how did you deal with some of these scenarios? How did you deal with maybe a professor that was difficult, a coach that could have been difficult? With some tough situation in your life. There's a lot of different variations of how they can ask you, but they want to get to know you and how you deal with certain things. There are plenty of helpful sites online, and the best way to get better at answering these is to have certain scenarios in your head and answers that you've already thought of, so you can just be more confident and natural in your delivery. I'll leave a link in the description to a website with some types of questions, and from personal experience, I've been asked the majority of the questions that are on this site, which is why I'm linking it in the description. So if you want to prepare for questions, studying these would be a great start, and then I'm sure you can Google even more questions and just have a broad range of scenarios, thoughts, ideas, feelings, all in your head so that you can just be kind of ready for whatever they're going to ask you. But really, this, as long as you're confident, comfortable, and yourself, you should be fine. Next up are the most hated but ever famous technical interviews. You know, you cannot always be ready for every single problem that they could possibly ask you for, because they could ask you just a very silly leak code problem that you never prepared for about some obscure data structure that you've never actually used on your job. So here's going to be kind of two ways to go about this. Either you're going to get an interviewer that asks you to do a task similar to what you would do on the job. Like for me, for one, where I was going to be a backend developer, he gave me kind of these link queries that I would have to write out for a list that he would give me. But I've also had interviewers that have asked me to flip and reverse lists using hash maps and blah, 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 blah. So it can depend. So it depends. So on one side, you could get someone that actually asks you to have either a technical discussion on how to build an application, that inquires kind of on your knowledge of certain technologies, or they could ask you to do something that's very focused on kind of what you would do. And in that case, just kind of studying your fundamentals in whatever languages you're kind of applying for, working on projects, just being knowledgeable and having, coding just fresh in your mind should have you in a good spot. But there's other companies that are going to ask you to kind of do these, these hackery leak code type of problems. And at that point, all you can really do is go over data structures, go over all these problems on all these different types of websites. Well, I will link in the description because there's a ton of them. And then just kind of going through programming fundamentals as well, whether that's like just knowing what inheritance is, polymorphism, all those fundamentals. And then just all you can do is code as much, code in different patterns, and just code. All you can do is code to prepare for these. I can't tell you do exactly this and you'll nail every technical interview, because I can't. Some people are better at coding under a time crunch than others. I personally am very bad at it, but I've had to work really hard to be good and obviously, to get a job. So just know that they're going to be hard and you may not always complete them and you may just bomb some, but that's just part of the way they structure these technical interviews, sadly. But there are things you can do if maybe you don't perform in those 30 minutes as well as you want to. And this is a massive pro tip. Anything you get wrong or can't complete in the allotted time, try and write it down, remember it, or save the code in whatever coding editor you were using or whatever coding environment you were in. Why do I say this? Because if you can, in an hour later, a little bit after, research the term, finish the code that you couldn't get done in now a more relaxed environment, you're not in the pressure of the interview, it's going to show that you could complete it and you showed initiative, passion, and a willingness to learn. People love this. Literally, my last job, I didn't finish the technical interview, but I submitted the finished code an hour later. And my manager now actually told me that she loved that I put the extra work in to finish and respond and follow up, and that I wasn't just like demoralized after I didn't finish in the time. And little things like that really stand out to hiring managers. As well, if you do want to practice more with kind of the technical questions and whatever problems they could possibly throw at you, like I said, there's LeetCode and HackerRank, and I'll try and link as many as I can in the description. And then depending on how these go, you could have multiple rounds of interviews depending on the company. But at this point, if you made it this far, you should have offers and be negotiating your salary, and my work is done. So please let me know if any part of this video helped you get an opportunity, and I would love if down the line some of you from the future could come back and tell me some of the tips that helped you get your first job in tech. I would love to know how I helped you guys, and how many of you guys actually got a job and I could help you guys. But if you have any other questions to ask me that maybe I didn't explain as well or that I didn't cover, please let me know in the comment section. I will always try and reply. And if you want to learn a bit more of what you need to know to be a developer, watch this video next with my 10 things all developers need to know.